Please don't eat that, Mum. Maya's voice trembled, but the elderly woman didn't hear her, or maybe she just ignored her. The spoon was already halfway to her lips when Maya rushed forward and smacked it out of her hand. The entire diner froze. Soup splattered across the tablecloth, the silver spoon spinning to the floor. What on earth do you think you're doing? The woman snapped, eyes wide with anger. Maya couldn't breathe. She didn't even have proof. I saw a man in a black suit. He put something in your food, Maya stammered, pointing toward the kitchen door. The woman blinked, frowning. A man? Are you joking? Now get me a new meal. I want this replaced. Maya swallowed hard, her heart racing. No, ma'am. I'm serious. You can't eat this. He left right after I stopped you. The woman's jaw tightened. I don't care who he is. I paid for this meal. Bring me another. Maya's hands shook. She didn't have proof, just instinct. But that instinct screamed danger, and no one in the diner knew it yet, but she had just saved the billionaire's mother. Welcome back, my beautiful family and friends. If you're hooked in and you're ready to enjoy this story, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because tomorrow I'll be giving you another story just as interesting as this one. And you don't want to miss it. Now, let's begin. Robert Doherty leaned back in his leather chair, staring out at the city lights that glittered like shards of glass below. The office was silent, except for the low hum of the heating system and the faint tick of his expensive watch. They were at it again, rival CEOs, greedy, ruthless men who'd sell their souls to see him fall. Robert had built his empire from nothing, every skyscraper, every contract, every deal, and now they wanted it all. But tonight they made a move, too bold, a strike that hit close to home. His phone buzzed, a secure line. He answered without hesitation. They think they can take me down? He asked, voice cold, steady. Yes, sir, replied the man on the other end. They've been planning for weeks, but they made one mistake. Robert's eyes darkened. What mistake? They forgot who you are. Robert almost smiled, almost. But instead he looked toward the framed photo of his mother on his desk. He didn't know it yet, but while he was preparing for war in the boardroom, she was walking straight into one in his restaurant. Carol Doherty hadn't planned to eat out that night. But something, call it curiosity, call it boredom, made her step into her son's restaurant for the first time. She didn't tell anyone. She wanted to see how the staff treated an ordinary customer. The restaurant was busy, elegant, warm. Waiters moved like clockwork, trays gliding between tables. No one knew who she was, and that was exactly how she wanted it. She sat near the window and ordered Robert's favorite dish. A quiet smile tugged at her lips as she remembered watching him eat it as a child. She had no idea that tonight that very dish was meant to kill him. Somewhere in the kitchen, a man in a black suit stood out among the staff. Too polished, too watchful. His movements were clean, almost rehearsed. Maya noticed him immediately. She wasn't supposed to work that night. She was covering a shift for a sick friend. But fate has a cruel sense of timing. As the man leaned near the dish and slipped something into the soup, Maya's breath caught. She didn't see what it was, but the shimmer, the deliberate move, the way he left right after, told her enough. Seconds later, the waitress, who was never meant to be there, stopped an assassination that was never meant to happen. The spoon hit the floor. The diner fell silent, and fate had just rewritten itself. The soup simmered innocently on the table, steam curling like thin fingers in the air. To anyone else, it looked ordinary. Perfectly arranged vegetables, golden broth, a sprig of parsley on top. But Robert Doherty's enemies had other plans. The real target that night wasn't Carol Doherty. It was her son. Robert had a routine. Every week he dined at his own restaurant, enjoying one small comfort, his favorite dish, prepared just the way he liked it. It was a rare moment when he could sit and forget the constant chess game of power, wealth, and betrayal that defined his life. And his enemies had studied that routine meticulously. They knew the dish, the timing, the servers' rotations. They knew that a single mistake could allow him to survive, or a single bite could end everything he had built. Somewhere in the kitchen a plan had been set into motion. A man, precise and patient, had slipped poison into the dish. Every ingredient had been checked, every step rehearsed. It was elegant, invisible, and deadly. But fate had other ideas. Carol Doherty, feeling restless, had chosen that night to visit. She didn't eat out often. Her quiet life was rarely disrupted. But something tugged at her, perhaps nostalgia, perhaps curiosity. She sat at the corner table, unaware of the danger at her fingertips. Maya, covering the shift she wasn't supposed to take, had no idea of any of this. All she knew was the shimmer in the soup, the unnatural movement of the man in the black suit, and the instinct that screamed, "Don't let her eat it." Her hands shook, heart racing, and she knocked the spoon from Carol's grasp. Soup spilled. The diner froze. Carol's anger erupted. "What do you think you're doing?" she shouted, voice sharp, eyes flashing. I saw a man in a black suit. He put something in your soup," Maya stammered. Carol frowned. "A man? I don't care who he is. Bring me another meal." Maya's stomach twisted. "No, Mum. I'm serious. You can't eat this." "He left after I stopped you." The elderly woman's jaw tightened, disbelief battling irritation. "I paid for this meal. I want it replaced immediately." Maya nodded, retreating, but inside her chest a storm raged. She didn't know she had just saved Robert Doherty's mother. She didn't know she had prevented a calculated assassination that could have changed the course of countless power plays in the city. Meanwhile, Robert Doherty was still in his office. He had sensed something was off, a new threat, a subtle whisper of danger only someone like him could detect. His rivals were cunning and ruthless. They wouldn't attack openly, not when they could strike in silence through a poisoned plate or a corrupt hand, and yet nothing could have prepared him for how close that strike came to home. He reviewed security footage, running each frame meticulously, noting every step of every waiter, every manager, every suspicious movement. His eyes narrowed at every detail, piecing together the patterns only he could see. And somewhere in the restaurant, Maya delivered the replacement meal. Carol's anger still simmered, unaware that her life had been spared by a young waitress she didn't know, a stranger who had no clue of her identity. Robert would later discover her courage, but tonight all that mattered was that the plan had failed. The poisoned meal never reached its intended target, and Maya, unknowingly, had become the first line of defense in a war that had been raging in shadows long before she stepped into that restaurant. Maya's hands trembled as she carried the replacement soup toward Carol Doherty's table. Her heart still raced from the moment she had smacked the spoon from the woman's hand. "Miss McGee," a sharp voice cut through the diner's hum. She looked up to see Gerald, the restaurant manager, storming toward her. "What do you think you're doing?" he barked, eyes narrowing, lips pressed into a thin line. I thought the food might be," Maya began, her voice small, unsure. "Enough!" Gerald snapped, stepping closer, his towering figure blocking her path. "You can't just interfere with VIP orders. Do you know who you're dealing with?" Maya swallowed hard. I saw a man put something in her soup. He left after I stopped her." Gerald's gaze darkened. He leaned closer, voice low, almost a hiss. "You don't understand, Maya. VIPs are untouchable. Rules are rules. You could have ruined everything." Her stomach churned. Something about his tone felt off, sharp, controlling. What Maya didn't know, what no one in the diner could see, was that Gerald had been paid by Robert's rivals. The man who had scolded her wasn't just a strict manager. He was a traitor. Every move he made was calculated, every word, every glare, a mask to hide his true intentions. He had ensured that the poisoned meal had reached its intended target. He had studied Robert's routine, known his weaknesses, and manipulated the staff to follow his instructions without question. And yet tonight, fate had intervened. Gerald's sharp eyes scanned the room, glancing toward Carol's table. He saw her unharmed. He saw Maya standing there, frozen, unaware of the empire-scale storm she had just disrupted. He clenched his fists. The girl didn't know. The diners didn't know.
And the woman herself, Robert's mother, had no idea how close she had come to death. A small, malicious smirk flickered across Gerald's face. He would make his move later. For now, he let the chaos settle, pretending everything was normal. Maya, terrified and shaking, placed the new soup in front of Carol. "Here, Mum. Fresh," she whispered. Carol's eyes narrowed. "About time. I hope you don't interfere again, young lady." Maya nodded silently, retreating toward the kitchen. Every nerve in her body screamed that something bigger was at play. She didn't understand it fully, but she knew instinctively that the danger hadn't passed. And it hadn't. Meanwhile, somewhere high above the city, Robert Doherty's mind was already racing. He didn't know yet about the failed attempt that night. He didn't know about the waitress who had unknowingly saved his mother's life. But he had always trusted his instincts, and instincts whispered that not everything at the restaurant was as it seemed. A mole could be anywhere, a traitor could be anyone, and he was determined to find them before the next strike came, because in the world he ruled, loyalty was rare and betrayal was lethal. The city lights shimmered beneath Robert Doherty's office window, casting long reflections across his polished desk. He was calm, collected, but every muscle in his body was tense. Tonight had a different feel. Something was off. A quiet warning, the kind only decades of navigating corporate warfare could sense. His phone buzzed, a discreet message from the restaurant. Nothing alarming, just a routine confirmation. But Robert knew better. He always did. He left the office, moving with the measured precision of a man accustomed to controlling everything in his world. In the back of his mind, a single thought burned. If someone tried tonight, they wouldn't just fail. They'd leave a mark. When Robert arrived at his restaurant, the familiar aroma of spices and simmering sauces filled the air. But something was different. A ripple of tension ran through the staff. Waiters whispered, dishes clattered too loudly, and the manager, Gerald, stood a little too rigidly by the entrance. Robert's eyes scanned the room, sharp and calculating, and then he saw her, Carol Doherty, seated at the corner table, fuming, gesturing at Maya McGee, the young waitress who had just placed another plate in front of her. The first thing he noticed was his mother's flushed face, hands still trembling from the shock of the interrupted meal. The second was the girl. Something about her stance, her fear, her resolve, it drew Robert's attention immediately. He approached silently, letting the scene play out for a moment. Carol was scolding Maya, voice clipped and sharp. "You dare stop me from eating? Do you have any idea who I am?" she snapped. Maya's hands shook. I saw a man. He put something in your food. He left after I stopped you." Carol blinked, anger and disbelief warring across her face. "I don't care. Bring me another meal." Robert's eyes narrowed. He had pieced it together in an instant. The black-suited man, the poisoned meal, his mother, and this small, trembling girl had saved her life. He cleared his throat, voice calm but carrying an unshakable weight. "Mother, I think you need to listen to her." Carol turned to him, startled. "Robert, what are you saying?" He pulled the chair beside her, kneeling slightly so his presence was commanding yet protective. "The meal you were about to eat, it wasn't meant for you. It was meant for me. Someone tried to poison me tonight." Her eyes widened. "What? How did you know?" "I didn't," Robert said, gaze shifting to Maya. "But she did." He gestured toward Maya. "This young lady stopped you from eating that soup. She saved your life." Carol's frown faltered, confusion giving way to dawning realization. Her anger softened, replaced by a cautious gratitude. You did what?" she whispered, turning to Maya. Maya, still shaking, nodded. I saw the man in the black suit. I didn't know who he was, but I just knew you shouldn't eat it." Carol's lips parted. Then a shaky exhale. I can't believe it. You saved me? Robert placed a reassuring hand on his mother's shoulder. She did, and thanks to her, I don't have to worry about what might have happened tonight. The diner seemed to exhale as tension melted from the air. Staff and patrons slowly returned to their meals, unaware of how close they had come to witnessing a tragedy. Carol Doherty, still processing the shock, finally met Maya's eyes. You're a brave girl, she said softly, and very lucky I didn't have a heart attack from your audacity. Maya swallowed, cheeks flushed. I just did what I had to do. Robert's gaze lingered on her. There was more than admiration there. Instinctively, he knew that Maya's courage wasn't just luck. It was something rare, something worth remembering. And somewhere in the back of his mind, the gears of his next moves had already begun to turn. The black-suited man had been seen, the trail of betrayal had begun, and Robert Doherty never let threats linger too long. Tonight, Maya had saved a life, but tomorrow, Robert would make sure the people behind the attempt understood one thing clearly. No one crossed him, or his family, without consequences. Carol Doherty sat back in her chair, still clutching the edge of the table. Her mind raced, trying to reconcile the fear she had just felt with the gratitude bubbling inside her. Her eyes fell on Maya, the young waitress who had thrown herself between Carol and the poisoned meal. Something about the girl's face, her small frame, the way she carried herself, it stirred a memory buried deep beneath years of careful recollection. Carol began slowly, her voice trembling with a mix of astonishment and disbelief. You remind me of someone. Maya's head tilted, confused. Me, Mum. Carol leaned closer, gaze sharp despite the lingering shock. Yes, your face. It's familiar, very familiar. Have I seen you before? Maya shook her head, hands folded nervously in front of her. No, Mum, I don't think so. Carol pursed her lips, studying the girl intently. Then her eyes softened. The memory surfaced with startling clarity, the laughter of a young girl in the hallways of the Doherty mansion, the sound of a gentle voice echoing through marble corridors. Maya, Carol said slowly, voice low. Your mother. She worked for us, didn't she?
Before your father passed? Maya's eyes widened. She hadn't expected Carol to know. Her mother, Nikki McGee, had indeed worked in the Doherty household years ago, long before Robert Doherty had inherited the empire. Her mother had been more than a housemaid. She had been part of the family's daily life, caring for the home, the meals, and sometimes even the children. Yes, ma'am, Maya whispered, her voice barely audible. She did. Carol's hand went to her chest. She exhaled, the anger she had felt moments ago dissolving into a fragile warmth. So this bravery, this instinct to protect me, she murmured, her gaze softening. It runs in your blood. Maya blinked, unsure how to respond. She had only acted on instinct, on a gut feeling that something was wrong.
She hadn't known she was saving the mother of the very family her own mother had served. Carol's lips curved into a small, almost imperceptible smile. Your mother, she was always careful, always kind. She had courage too. I see now, it lives in you as well. Maya lowered her eyes, cheeks warm. I just wanted to help, Mum. I didn't know it was you. Carol reached across the table, her hand resting gently on Maya's. You saved me tonight, Maya, not just from the soup, but from what might have happened if you hadn't acted, and I will never forget that. Robert, standing a few steps away, watched the exchange quietly. He saw the connection forming, a bond of gratitude, of recognition, of something deeper that even Maya couldn't yet understand. He knew this young girl had a heart that couldn't be swayed by fear, a courage that defied circumstance. And he made a mental note. Maya McGee was someone to remember. The diner had calmed now, Patrons whispered curiously, staff moved cautiously, and Gerald, the manager, remained at a distance, unaware that the girl he had scolded had just earned the unspoken admiration of the Doherty family. For Carol, the night had been a revelation. For Maya, it had been a shift in destiny she couldn't yet comprehend. And for Robert Doherty, it was another reminder that in a world of power and betrayal, sometimes salvation came from the most unexpected places. On top of that stack was one labeled Internal Risk, Grant M. Robert's jaw tightened. He'd known for days. He'd seen the signs, the late-night calls, the subtle code words, the falsified inventory sheets. Grant thought he was careful, but Robert Doherty hadn't built an empire by trusting smiles. He leaned back in his chair, tapping a finger on the file. "Let him think he's winning," Robert murmured. "People reveal more when they believe they're safe." That afternoon, Mr. Grant walked into the office with his usual self-assured grin. "Mr. Doherty," he greeted, voice smooth as silk. "Just wanted to give you the weekly update. Sales are up. The kitchen's running tighter than ever. I also had the staff sign the new confidentiality forms as requested." Robert looked up slowly, his expression neutral. "Good. Sit." Grant obeyed, but inside his mind was already working. The old man doesn't suspect a thing, he thought. Just a few more weeks and the next phase begins. "Tell me, Grant," Robert said evenly, "how are you finding the new suppliers?" Grant hesitated. The question came out of nowhere. "Perfectly fine, sir. All approved. Quality control has checked everything." Robert smiled faintly as though satisfied. "Good. I'll be visiting the restaurant tonight. Quietly. Don't announce it. I'll want to observe things as they are." Grant nodded. "Of course, sir. I'll make sure everything's perfect." When he left the office, his phone buzzed in his pocket. Is he suspicious? He smirked. Not a clue. He trusts me completely. That night, Robert arrived at the restaurant in casual attire, blending into the background. He watched as Grant gave orders, smiling, pretending to be the loyal manager. Every movement was rehearsed, every gesture crafted to sell an image of devotion. But Robert saw through it all. He'd planted subtle traps throughout the restaurant system over the past week. Small digital breadcrumbs only a traitor would trigger. And tonight, Grant walked right into them. When Robert returned to his private office later that evening, a message awaited him on his laptop screen. Alert. Unauthorized access detected. Inventory files, shipment ledger, and surveillance timestamp logs. User G. Grant. Robert smiled quietly. "Got you," he whispered. The next morning, Grant came into the office carrying 2 cups of coffee. "Morning, sir," he said warmly, handing one to Robert. "Thought you might need this. You've been working hard lately." Robert accepted it, his gaze calm. "You're right, Grant. I have been working hard, watching, studying, listening." Grant laughed nervously. "Oh, studying what exactly?" Robert leaned forward slightly. "Patterns, behavior, the way people act when they're under pressure." A flicker of confusion crossed Grant's face. "I'm not sure I follow." Robert took a slow sip of the coffee before setting it down. "You should. You're quite the actor, Grant. Convincing. Loyal on the outside, but calculating underneath. Almost made me believe it." Grant froze. "Sir, I don't understand." Robert cut him off. "Save it. You've been feeding my rivals information for weeks. You thought you were playing me, but I've been 3 steps ahead since the day you started texting them from your office." Grant's face went pale. You can't prove." Robert pressed a button on his desk. A monitor flickered to life, displaying time-stamped footage of Grant's office, every coded message, every falsified shipment. "I don't need to prove it to you," Robert said coolly. "I just wanted to watch you try to lie to my face one more time." For a long moment, silence filled the room. Then Robert stood. "Here's the thing, Grant. I'm not turning you in yet." Grant blinked, shocked. "What?" "You're going to keep working," Robert said. "You're going to keep feeding them information, but this time it'll be my information, You'll send what I tell you when I tell you. You wanted to play a game of betrayal? Let's see how good you really are." Grant stared, breath quickening. "You're using me as bait?" Robert's eyes hardened. "No, I'm using you as a mirror, to let them see what I want them to see. You can either help me expose them, or you can go down with them. Your choice." The manager's lips trembled, torn between fear and defiance. But he nodded slowly. "Understood, sir?" Robert smiled coldly. "Good. Because in my world, Grant, the real game isn't played with money or power. It's played with patience. And the first rule of survival," he leaned closer, voice low and sharp, "is knowing when you're being played." Grant left the office pale and shaken, realizing for the first time that he'd never been in control. He'd stepped into the lion's den thinking he was the hunter. But Robert Doherty had been watching all along, calm, silent, and deadly. The hunter had just become the prey. Night had settled over the city like a sheet of velvet, calm on the surface, but alive with the quiet pulse of power underneath. In a private conference room high above downtown, Robert Doherty stood before a wall of screens, each displaying encrypted data feeds. On one of them, a small red light blinked, the signal that Grant had made contact. "Let's begin," Robert murmured, his reflection sharp in the glass. Hours earlier, Grant had received a coded instruction from his old handlers. "Next meeting, tonight. Bring details on Doherty's new project." He'd stared at the message for a long time before replying, "Understood." Only now he wasn't playing their game. He was following Robert's script. Every file on his encrypted drive, every note he carried, was false. Robert had crafted an elaborate illusion. Fake contracts, fake investors, even a dummy plan for a new acquisition that didn't exist. Robert's goal wasn't just to mislead his enemies. He wanted them to reveal their own network, their connections, their safe channels, their faces. At precisely 10:47 p.m., in an abandoned construction office on the edge of the city, Grant met two men dressed in dark suits. They didn't shake hands. One of them, sharp jawline, piercing grey eyes, spoke first. "Do you have what we asked for?" "Yes," Grant replied, forcing his voice to stay steady. "Everything you wanted on Doherty's offshore project. Blueprints, partners, financial transfers." He handed over a slim flash drive. The man inserted it into a laptop, scanning the files quickly. "Interesting. A private acquisition in Dubai?" "Exactly," Grant said. "He's planning something big, something he doesn't want the board to know." The second man narrowed his eyes. "How do you know this is real?" Grant smirked.
"Would I be standing here if it wasn't?" The men exchanged a glance. One nodded approvingly. "You've done well. There's more coming your way soon. Keep your position close to him. We'll need details about his next move." As Grant left the building, he didn't notice the small black drone hovering in the darkness above, silent, steady, and recording everything. Back at Doherty Enterprises, Robert watched the live feed in real time. He stood beside his head of security, arms folded. "Did they take the bait?" the security chief asked. Robert's lips curled faintly. "Every word. They believe Grant's still their man." He zoomed in on the screen, freezing the frame as the grey-eyed man looked directly toward the camera. "There," Robert said. "Pause. Enhance." The software sharpened the image, enough to capture a face.
A name flickered onto the screen beside it. Adrian Keller, CEO of Keller Dynamics, one of Robert's oldest business rivals. Robert's gaze darkened. "I should have known." Meanwhile, Maya was finishing the late shift at the restaurant, unaware that she was now part of a silent chess game unfolding above her head. She noticed Robert's visits had become less frequent, replaced by quiet men in suits who seemed to watch everything. When she asked one of them, the man simply said, "Mr. Doherty's handling security matters. You don't need to worry." But she did worry. Every night felt heavier. There were whispers among the staff. Strange deliveries, men in unmarked cars waiting outside, new faces checking in without dining. Something was happening behind the calm, and Maya could sense it. Later that week, Robert met with Grant privately in his office. "You did well," Robert said, studying him closely. "They bought it." Grant tried to sound confident, but his palms were slick with sweat. "What happens now?" Robert leaned back. "Now? We wait. They'll try to move fast, thinking they have leverage. When they do, we'll strike. I want every message they send traced, every meeting logged, every dollar followed. We'll burn them from the inside." Grant nodded. But as he turned to leave, Robert added quietly, "One more thing, Grant." He stopped. "Yes, sir?" Robert's tone was calm but sharp as glass. "If you ever decide to switch sides again, you won't get a second warning. I let you play your game once. Don't mistake that for mercy." Grant froze, nodding slowly before walking out. He thought he understood power, but now he realized Robert Doherty didn't just own power. He was power. That night, as the city lights shimmered below, Robert poured himself a glass of scotch and stared out the window of his penthouse. In the reflection, he could see both himself and the skyline, the empire he'd built, and the enemies hiding within it. He wasn't just protecting his business anymore, he was preparing for war. And this time the bait was set. The rivals had revealed themselves, and Robert Doherty, patient, calculating, unshakable, was ready to strike back. The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of Robert Doherty's penthouse, but inside the atmosphere was electric. Screens flickered with live feeds, flashing faces and locations, all part of the careful trap he had laid for months. Robert stood behind his desk, arms crossed, watching as teams of authorities moved with precision. Every arrest, every seizure of documents, every unexpected raid played out exactly as he had predicted. In the city's most exclusive boardrooms, luxury cars pulled up to police barricades. Rival CEOs, once smug and untouchable, were now cuffed and led away. Their shock and disbelief were palpable, their networks unraveling under the weight of Robert's meticulous planning. From behind the monitors, Robert's eyes never wavered. Adrian Keller, the grey-eyed CEO who had tried to manipulate Grant, now sat in the back of a police van, staring at the skyline that had once symbolized his own ambition. Other conspirators, lawyers, accountants, and executives, were swept into custody, each one unaware of how Robert had anticipated every move, every secret meeting, every hidden transfer of information. Meanwhile, back in the Doherty offices, Maya watched in awe. The young waitress who had unknowingly saved Carol Doherty now witnessed the collapse of a shadow empire. The tension that had gripped the city for months was dissolving before her eyes, replaced by a sense of order, a justice carefully orchestrated by a man who never lost sight of the bigger picture. Robert finally lowered his gaze from the screens and exhaled slowly. The city was watching, yes, but they were also learning a lesson. No empire could be shaken without leaving its betrayers exposed. He turned to Gerald, his manager, who had remained loyal in the ways that mattered most. "The network is gone," Robert said calmly. "Our enemies are facing justice, and the city now knows the truth." Gerald nodded, relief and a hint of pride flickering across his face. "You planned all of this from the start, sir. Every step." Robert allowed a small smile. "Every step. And now we rebuild, stronger, smarter, untouchable." Outside, the streets were alive with news crews, flashing cameras, and the murmurs of citizens who had watched the drama unfold. Headlines would declare arrests, betrayals, and the downfall of some of the city's most powerful figures. But in the midst of it all, one truth stood clear. Robert Doherty had not only survived the storm, he had controlled it. For the first time in months, the billionaire CEO leaned back in his chair, feeling a rare weight lift from his shoulders. The city, the enemies, and the chaos, all accounted for, all neutralized. Justice had been served, and Robert Doherty remained untouchable. With the rivals behind bars, the tension in Robert's office finally eased. The empire he had built, once threatened from every angle, now felt secure. Yet his eyes fell on Gerald, the manager who had betrayed him, but had also followed the rules of Robert's game. "You've made mistakes," Robert said quietly, voice even but firm. But you followed through when it mattered. That counts for something. Gerald nodded, swallowing hard. Thank you, sir.
I won't let you down again. Robert's gaze softened slightly. I believe you, but understand this. Loyalty isn't just about surviving the game, it's about choosing the right side before the consequences hit. Meanwhile, Maya stood at the edge of the office, still in disbelief over everything that had unfolded. Her actions had unknowingly saved Carol Doherty, thwarted a plan that could have killed Robert, and now she was witnessing the quiet aftermath of a corporate war. Maya stepped closer, her voice hesitant but steady. Like, trust? Robert turned, a small ghost of a smile tugging at his lips. Like love, he said. The city outside had begun to glisten under the first light of dawn, rain washing away the grime, leaving everything fresh and new. For the first time in years,
Robert Doherty didn't feel like a man constantly playing a game. He felt like a man who had won something real. Life, loyalty, and the chance for genuine connection. And as he looked at Maya and then toward the horizon, he knew this was just the beginning of a life where he could finally protect those he cared about, without constantly watching his back. The storm had passed, the enemies had been revealed, and Robert Doherty had emerged victorious, not just in business but in life. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine, so do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.